We're delighted to have you with us. So before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping rules. So please ensure your microphones are muted during the presentations to minimise the background noise. So you can use the chat function for any questions or comments throughout the session, and note if they are directed to a specific presenter, we will address them during the dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation section. So please note this webinar is being recorded. I have pressed the recording button and the recording will be shared with everybody afterwards. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands from which we meet today, as well as where learning takes place across Australia and globally. I recognise the richness our First Nations community members bring to all our communities and honour their learning that has been passed down through generations for thousands of years. So I'd like to invite you all to tell us where you're joining from today. Please use the chat function. I will add a link to the Welcome to Country and acknowledgement map to assist you. So now I'm very pleased to welcome Jenny, our MC and moderator for today's webinar. Jenny, over to you.
Thank you so much. Welcome everyone to today's online learning webinar, and we're very delighted to have you with us. So what I'd like to do is just acknowledge that I am on Wurundjeri land. So Wominjinka is the local language of the Aboriginal people here from the Kulin Nation, and I am in Melbourne, or NAM, which is they refer to for the First Nations people. I'm the CEO of Adult Learning Australia, or ALA for short. We're a national not-for-profit peak organisation that's dedicated to adult learning and community education, and we've been going for over 65 years. Now, ALA is one of the partners who is hosting today, and the others include UNESCO, Global Network of Learning Cities, PASCAL, the International Observatory Learning Cities Network, Cork and Limerick in Ireland, Wyndham in Australia, Durban in South Africa, and the Australian Learners Communities Network. So we've got a broad representation. It's great to have such global partners involved with us today or tonight, wherever you are. So as your MC, I will try to ensure everything runs smoothly and on time. I'll give speakers a 1-minute notice to wrap up, because we've got such a packed agenda and we need to be fair to everyone so we finish up on time. In terms of the webinar, this webinar builds on previous sessions, continuing our exploration of opportunities and challenges in using a learning centre and learning city approach to promote lifelong learning for both individuals and communities. So UNESCO's Institute of Lifelong Learning highlights learning celebrations as a key feature of learning cities. In addition to contributing to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, learning festivals provide opportunities for broader, more accessible learning. So some questions that have been raised, and you might think about these as we go through the session today. Can a learning festival be a catalyst for a sustainable, resilient and entrepreneurial learning city? What strategies and partnerships need to be in place? How does the Learning Festival encourage broad, inclusive participation? What about long-term leadership at all levels? And what sort of evidence is there that these learning festivals work in engaging people in lifelong learning? Cork and Limerick in Ireland and Wyndham in Australia will reflect on these considerations and the principles guiding their learning festivals, including adaptations to meet rapid change and long-term benefits and challenges. Durban in South Africa will respond on how these principles apply to the global south. So we've got a fantastic keynote speaker tonight, and 4 panellists on the program. You can read more about our speakers in the resource document that was emailed out, or you can go to a link which I'll put in the chat box. So I'd now like to introduce our opening guest speaker. So our opening address will be via Rob Mark, coordinator of PASCAL, Learning Cities Network in the University of Glasgow, and they're on the opposite time frame to what we are here in Melbourne, Australia. Welcome, Rob. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you, Jenny, and good day down there, and hello to everyone wherever you are. I've been on a bit of a journey myself from east to west in the last couple of days, having been in Taiwan and in the United Arab Emirates, and I just arrived some hours ago I'm in Dublin at the minute. And of course I work in Glasgow too, where I used to be full-time member of staff. I'm now, you might say, part-time, and work partly with the PASCAL project. The PASCAL Observatory seeks to bring stakeholders together through interactive policy-orientated groups within cities to share ideas and experiences. It's a completely voluntary project that doesn't have funding, and the people that contribute to it do through their own resources and time. So that obviously has some bearing in what it can achieve, but I think there's a lot of positive things coming too from no funding. It has its limitations, but there are many positive things that can happen. We just had our PASCAL conference on new challenges for cities and regions, addressing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in Taipei, Taiwan, with over 90 papers given on a whole range of topics, including climate change, pandemics, artificial intelligence, diversity and inequalities, and economic implications. To the topic today about learning festivals, I suppose we could say that learning festivals aim to be transformative, dynamic, inclusive, and to promote a culture of lifelong learning which involves everyone. It's about the democratization of education through a wide range of activities and workshops, reaching people who might not otherwise have the chance to participate. And we'll hear a lot about that, I'm sure, later on today. Learning festivals are also essential for fostering sustainable and inclusive communities. The UNESCO Global Network, as we've heard from Jenny, emphasizes the role of lifelong learning, promoting sustainable development, global citizenship, and improved well-being. And there are other projects like the Learning Planet Festival is another excellent example, which turns the world into a grand celebration of innovative educational practices, gathering together thousands of students, teachers, academics, and artists to explore new models and solutions for transforming education. Who might we consider, and as we try to engage new groups who are not yet there? I want to suggest maybe 4 groups that I think are important. They're perhaps there in some festivals and perhaps not in others, but these are ones from my experience that I think are worth focusing on. The first is young people, particularly young people of school age. I had the privilege to be involved in a project called MUN Schools, Municipals and Schools, which was coordinated by a school in the city of Nocera in Umbria in Italy. And they organized several festivals, one there in their city, Nocera, another one in a small city near Timișoara in Romania. And we also had activities in Greece and in Spain and in Israel, the other partners in the project. What I found from that was that young people were able to get very interested and enthused by the idea of being a learning city. They took the responsibility for organizing the festival, with some support obviously within the school, but they were the main organizers of the event, and it was terrific to see how they could engage people of all ages in the activities. The second group that I would like to mention is people with literacy needs. I've always been a researcher in the field of adult literacy and working in that field myself for a long time. And I think we shouldn't forget there are people who have, for whatever reason, unable to communicate, read as the way we would expect people can. And so I think if we want to engage with all people, we have to think about how to reach people who can't read literature very well, and how we can use non-text approaches to learning. A third group, which I got interested in through a colleague in Australia back in 2007, was the older men, through Barry Golding and Annette Foley at Ballarat. And we worked together and actually ended up publishing a book about men and learning. And I think, you know, it's not to say that it isn't important for everyone, but it is true that a lot of men don't engage easily. And that can have implications for everybody, downside. So the Men's Sheds research shows how men do engage in a lot of activities, and perhaps these are things we need to think about when we're organising festivals if we want to encourage men and boys to get more involved. The other group that I'd like to mention are people of different ethnicities, whether they're migrants, refugees, war victims, or whatever. Recently in Dublin, I attended a very interesting festival, a multicultural festival organised by TSFI Foundation and Clongriffin Community Association, North County Dublin, with funding from the Community Integration Fund and various government departments. More than 50 nationalities living in the area were present, and over 3,000 people have attended the festival. The foundation also throughout the year provide a lot of support to people from ethnic backgrounds. For example, they deliver free meals in the evening for people in destitution through the centre of Dublin, and they have a motto of peace, love, and unity. So I think that, you know, that's another group we have to think about. While they organise their own festivals, how do we integrate them into the wider festivals? Perhaps that's already happening in some places, but how much and how successful is it? We need to think about. So in conclusion, as we continue to develop and support learning festivals, we must recognise their role in civic engagement. These festivals encourage active participation in community life and empower individuals to take ownership of their educational journeys. By involving citizens in the planning and execution of festival activities, we can create a more engaged and informed population, better equipped to address local challenges and to contribute to the development of their cities. Learning festivals can be powerful catalysts for education and social transformation. They provide an inclusive and dynamic environment where learning is celebrated, communities are strengthened, and individuals are empowered to reach their full potential. So by looking to the future, let us continue to champion these festivals and work together to build vibrant, educated, and resilient communities. I look forward to hearing what various people have to say today on their activities and to learn from your experience. And thank you all for asking me to speak at this very important event.
Rob, sorry, I just had trouble clicking the right icons on. Thank you so much. You've taken us around the world with your description of places like Romania, Greece, Spain, Israel, Ireland, everywhere. You seem to have been everywhere at one time or another. So thank you so much for that introduction. It's really important to have that big picture overview before we go down to a more local level with some of our case studies. If people have got comments, can they put them please in the chat? And there'll be a chance for some Q&A a bit later on once we've heard the panellists. But thank you so much. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind about how we might be using some of the information that we learned tonight about how we might use that to look to the future. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our first panellist. We're going to provide 4 panellists with a range of case studies. So we've got Dennis Barrett from the UNESCO Learning City of Cork City Council. He is the UNESCO Learning City Coordinator there. And we have 3 other panellists after Dennis, and I'll introduce them as we get to their cases. So he is collaborating with the University College Cork, Munster Technological University, Cork Education and Training Board, and other partners to promote lifelong learning. So I invite Dennis to come on board and talk about the Learning Festival's Pathways to Sustainable Learning Cities, reflections on Cork's journey over the last 22 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And good evening, good afternoon, good morning from Cork in Ireland. Really happy to join you this morning. Thank you for the invitation for us to be part of this conversation. When I speak, I always reflect on the fact that I'm really grateful to be in a role where there are such a range of partners, committed partners behind the work. So when I speak, I bring with me all those voices from the university, from the University Technical College, from the Education and Training Board, which is our statutory organiser and coordinator of adult education, lifelong learning, community education, adult literacy, youth work, youth services, and some schools. There are such a range of partners supporting this work. And I myself am based in Cork City Council, which in the Irish system doesn't play a statutory role in learning, but has come really behind in a very solid way this commitment. And that goes back to the year 2002. So when I looked at the questions that were being posed about this morning's meeting, it just brought me back in a really nice circular way to 2013. And that was a significant year for us. So in 2002, in a document called Imagine Our Future, the city set out to be a city of learning. And its commitments then are still relevant now. So I really have to say we continue to stand on the shoulders of the giants, very wise men and women who wanted Cork to have access to learning available for all levels and to all ages in the city, for the city to be recognised nationally and internationally as a centre of learning and research, and crucially that it involved all stakeholders in lifelong learning, formal, non-formal and informal. And those are 3 commitments that the city made then that still stand today. And I feel very, very lucky to be working in a role that can help deliver on that with all of those partners. So the other key phrase that we've held on to ever since is that we are working to create a culture of lifelong learning in Cork. And like these phrases that maybe a PR company would come up with, the question is, what does that look like? What does a culture of lifelong learning look like in a city like Cork? And for us, one of the early ideas was a festival. And I remember sitting in City Hall. I was newly in the city then in 2003 when the first meetings around organising a festival were held. And I wasn't convinced. I was in the audience and I heard people on the stage speaking about the idea of a festival. And I thought, I better get on board this because I'm not convinced about it. We have lots of festivals in Cork, jazz festivals, folk festivals, film festivals. There's a lot of socialising. There's a lot of late night entertainment, and learning is a serious business. Education is a serious business. It tackles really serious societal challenges like Rob outlined there, and the SDGs also outline. And the 2 I found were unusual bedfellows, the idea of celebration and the serious business of learning. But I said I would get on board. My role was as a community education coordinator then. And the first festival started in 2004. And from then, I was proven absolutely wrong because the first festival, it held 2 key principles. You may advance onto the next slide, please. it held two key principles: that all the events had to be free. And that's been key because over the years the festival has grown. And the second key principle was that all of the events had to be open to everybody. There was no restriction. There could be no restriction on this event is for such and such a person or such and such a community. The other key, I suppose, we had to do this at the start, and as Rob said, sometimes no money is not a bad thing. We didn't fund any event. So our organising committee was drawn from a whole range of partners that are still all committed, but we didn't have funding to fund the events. We offered the opportunity for hosts to host their own events using their own funding, their own resources. So the energy around the festival from the very start in Cork has been a voluntary energy. So those 64 events in the very first year were just the seeds. And in practically every single case, the organisations who were involved in 2004 have kept going. They still have events in the festival today. So we'll be celebrating our 21st festival because of the 2 years of COVID next year. And that's one of our celebratory pieces, to celebrate the groups and the individuals and the organisations that have been with us all the way through those years. So on this slide, there's just a snapshot of some of the activities that happen. They're really, really inclusive. They reach to all corners of the city. All ages, interests and abilities are catered for, and they include a whole variety of everything. One of the shots on this slide that we're very proud of is the President of Ireland, Michael D. Higgins, who's a poet. And he contacted the festival in 2018. We had really hoped he would join us for the international conference in 2017, and he was unable to. But his office contacted us in 2018 and asked, could he visit the festival? But that he didn't want a big formal welcome. He wanted to attend a festival event. So in our city centre library, there was a music celebration of young people, and that's the event he came to. And the young people and their parents we couldn't advertise it publicly. It was quite a small event, but the young people and their parents, it just gave them such a lift, and it gave everybody such a lift really in the city. But that's just one of the energy pieces along the way. The festival's motto is investigate, participate, celebrate. And that aspect of joy, bringing the joy of learning something new, the fun of it back, really reconnecting with it, because that's such a life force of learning. In terms of sustainability, I will reflect back to 2013. I think I saw George Osborne logging on with us earlier there. So George spoke at our festival in 2013, and that was the same year that the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities was formed. And UNESCO visited subsequently in 2015, and we just were there at the right time. We had a strong, committed set of partners. So we joined at the very beginning of the Global Network of Learning Cities, and we reached out across the island of Ireland subsequently. And my colleague Yvonne Lane will speak a little bit about that. But I do want to pay a tribute to people who made the festival what it is. Our voluntary committee, our chair, Willie McAuliffe, who has been on the committee since the very first year. And we've had two amazing coordinators, Tina Nalan and Siobhan McCarthy. And Yvonne and Tina both co-authored that paper asking the question, could learning festivals be a pathway to sustainable learning cities? And it was really prompted by Peter Kearns, your own countryman, Peter, and his wife Denise, who visited Cork at that time and visited our communities and gave us another challenge that we took up. So if you move on to the next slide, that prompt, using the festival as a base, using the same model as a base, how could we bring this back to the communities themselves, the grassroots partners? And that idea of a learning neighbourhood was Peter's idea. And he was very generous in bringing it to us. He offered it to us on the basis that we should try it out and make our own of it. And that's what we've done in Cork. We have 6 with one brand new this year, so 7 now, learning neighbourhoods in the city. So I like to think of this whole journey as top down, bottom up, and middle out. So the top down was the high level goal back in 2002. The middle out is that organising committee that made the festival and made other initiatives happen in the city that brought the idea of a learning city into connection with the citizens to make it real for people who live in the city. And then the bottom up piece is our Learning Neighbourhoods programme. So during the festival, we've many partners who host events. In this year, 2024, we had 413 events, and we do a calculation based on attendance numbers, and we have now 28,910 individuals have been reached using that calculation this year. So it has grown hugely over those years because it's come from the people themselves. So the bottom up opportunity to make a learning neighbourhood idea work was local steering groups, again supported by the lead partners, making their own decisions. And our task as lead partners is to follow their lead. So if they have a plan to make their area a better learning community or a learning neighbourhood, then our challenge is how can we best support them to do that? And that came directly from the same model as the festival, and it has the same local energy, that same voluntary spirit. So we have a phrase in Cork, work with the willing. So when we invite people to form a learning neighbourhood steering group, sometimes the obvious players don't immediately put their hand up. The local school or maybe a local creche is so busy with their day job they can't stretch themselves. But we get on with the business, we put our plans in place, create activities. They include showcases, programs like the Faces of Learning. You see it on the back of the bus in that shop there. Local consultation days, expos, where all the learning opportunities in an area are presented on a given day. The Neighbourhood University College programme, where voluntary lecturers from our third level partners give sample sessions in local communities. All of those activities are, they make that idea real and they bring more support over time. If you move on the slide there, please. I suppose just coming back to where are we now, 22 years later, the year 2017 was an amazing opportunity to connect our work with the work of cities right around the world. And it was a huge honour to be invited to host the third UNESCO International Conference on Learning Cities. And it gave us something else in that it gave us a policy document. The Cork Call to Action on Learning Cities was central in the Sustainable Development Goals document that UNESCO produced afterwards. And it gave us 3 pillars. It called on all of the mayors to make their learning cities green and healthy, equitable and inclusive, and to support decent work and entrepreneurship. So it gave us a practical way to bring all 17 UN SDGs to connect with the work we're doing in Cork across all of the partners. And we've held on to those pillars ever since, and they've prompted us to do things like the SDG Leadership Series in the city, where lead players in the private sector, public sector and community and voluntary sector all met in 2020 when there was 10 years of the SDGs remaining, and they committed to work together to bring the SDGs into reality for our city. And some of the commitments that have flowed from that include Cork being selected as a net zero city, as a mission city in the EU by the European Commission to have net zero emissions by 2030. So my final slide, please, is so reflecting on the journey and where has that brought us. Can a festival, that simple idea of celebrating learning, make a learning city idea sustainable? Our experience so far is that it can. We've been hugely encouraged by some of those Australian visitors all those years ago, and I do want to give a shout out to Peter and Denise and George and others, and Diane, who visited us back in 2017. But how do we know it has maybe made a difference over time? It's embedded now in our local policies, our local economic and community plan, which deals with the economic development of the city around employment, skills, and also in the City Council's own corporate plan. as I say, City Council doesn't have a formal role in lifelong learning. So by the year 2024, which is the year of that plan, and a new local economic and community plan is being formed now, and commitment to lifelong learning is embedded in that. And it's a step on the road. We've a long way to go. We have still plenty of energy for the journey, and it's been brilliant to share with you this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Congratulations, Dennis. You're right on time. So thank you for that. A great presentation, and we'll have a chance to give some feedback, but I can see that people have already put some comments in the chat, and I've been to Cork a couple of times, and it's really good to hear that the Learning Festival is also focusing on joy and the fun of learning, which is often left out, although it has other serious aspects as well. And the idea of the faces of learning on the buses going around the city sounds fabulous to me. So thank you very much. Our second panellist is John Sheen from Wyndham, who's representing the Wyndham UNESCO Learning City. He's the Director of Education at the Wyndham Community Education Centre, and I'm really pleased to say that I know John fairly well. We've worked together off and on over the last 8 years or so. John has been a member of the co-lead team of the Wyndham Learning Festival since its inception in 2016. And he'll talk about co-leading for community impact, the evolution of the Wyndham Learning Festival. So I invite you now, John, to take up your spot on the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate that introduction. So the Wyndham Learning Festival is an annual series of events delivered by the community for the community. It provides opportunities for free learning activities across the city of Wyndham in Melbourne. The city of Wyndham covers an area of around 542 kilometres squared. It's located in Melbourne's outer southwestern suburbs. So it's about 12 kilometres to 45 kilometres from the Melbourne CBD. The city of Wyndham is made up of around 17 suburbs with a population of nearly 300,000 people. And as of 2023, Wyndham City Council ranks as one of the larger local government areas in Australia by population. Since 2016, the population of Wyndham has increased by 34.5%. So it's seen incredible growth of new and emerging communities into the southwest of Melbourne. The festival is a direct response to Wyndham City Council's learning community strategy, aligning to the goals outlined for 2018 to 2023 and looking ahead to 2024 to 2029. The festival has activities for all ages and interests, promoting lifelong learning for all, and each year welcomes new events, sponsors, and participants to reflect the diverse and dynamic community of Melbourne's growing outer western suburbs. And we, picking up on some of the conversation earlier, there is a really strong approach in the Wyndham Learning Festival around inclusion, particularly of called communities, how to engage men. So that has been something that really the Wyndham Learning Festival continues to focus on. So the festival is held from the 1st to the 7th of September each year, and it aligns with Australia's Adult Learners Week. Adult Learners Week is a UNESCO initiative supported in Australia by the Commonwealth Department of Employment and Workplace Relations and is coordinated by Adult Learning Australia. And as previously mentioned, our host this evening, Jenny McCaffer, is the CEO of Adult Learning Australia. The Wyndham Learning Festival is led by Wyndham Community and Education Centre, a non-government organisation, and supported, or I like to say co-led, by Wyndham City Council. So the next slide, please. So the Wyndham Learning Festival is a testament to the power of community collaboration. For 8 years, this event has flourished through a unique partnership between Wyndham City Council and Wyndham Community Education Centre, or as I will refer to it, Wyndham CEC. This partnership has not only enabled the festival to grow, but it's also ensured it remains responsive to the needs of our community. So Wyndham CC is a trusted local non-government organisation. As a charity, it offers a range of education, employment and community development programs across Melbourne's west. Working in partnership with Wyndham City Council, the effective festival management involves a co-lead team and a working group. The co-lead team is made up of 2 representatives, each from Wyndham City Council and Wyndham CC, who collaborate closely across the year through regular meetings. Numerous emails, lots of phone calls, especially as you get closer to the festival. But people, it's interesting, people think when you're running a learning festival that there is some downtime, but interestingly, I think you actually learn as you do 8 years of a festival that there isn't a lot of downtime. Pretty much once you've evaluated the last festival, it's pretty much straight on to looking at the next festival. So there's not as much downtime as you would expect running an annual learning festival. So the co-lead team got the 2 representatives from each organisation, and then we have a working group which has strong representation across Wyndham City Council departments, including libraries, youth, arts, sustainability and the environment, council-managed community centres and sports and recreation. The working group also includes representatives from Wyndham CC, a local university, Victoria University, and a vocational training provider known as TAFE in Australia. As well, over the 8 years, there's been business and sponsor input into that working group. The working group provides local advice, assists with marketing and promotion, and supports the setup and delivery of major learning festival events. Over the course of the 8 years, the role of the working group has evolved, and over the last couple of years, we've assigned each working group member to be responsible for a category of the learning festival, whether that's arts, sport and recreation, history, culture and diversity. And that also helps us make sure that we're representing every area of Wyndham City. The Wyndham Learning Festival Code Lead approach has significant support from Wyndham City Council in terms of strategic advice and coordination, communications, venue provision, and marketing and promotion. Wyndham CC complements this support with additional festival coordination, website hosting, promotional efforts, and the use of its charity status for sponsorship and funding. Next slide, please. So over the past 8 years, the Wyndham Learning Festival has adapted to meet the evolving needs of our community. Initially a large-scale event, we've refined our approach based on community feedback, creating a more targeted program that better serves our diverse audience. Of course, in 2020 and 2021, we saw a significant shift to the transition of online events. And this did, whilst prove problematic and challenging at the time, did expand our reach and accessibility in terms of the audience that we were able to reach. And again, many more people looking at the Learning Festival from Wyndham across Melbourne, across Australia, across a wider area. We also have an impact on moving towards a low impact curation model, focusing on sustainable and community driven events that already exist in our community, rather than encouraging events providers to try something new. There's an inherent risk in putting on a new event for the festival, investing a lot finding a new audience. So we really instead encourage people to celebrate what's existing in our community and really harnessing things that they already do and building new audiences. So that's a really strong focus of the Wyndham Learning Festival. The festival now has features a wide range of learning categories. Jenny's logging on. Have I got a time?
You've got a minute or 2 left, John.
I'm pretty much right on time, so that's good. Thanks, Jenny.
No worries, thank you. I'm sorry, it has to be my face that comes
I know, but I kind of picked up that you were there, so that's fine. So the festival features a wide range of learning categories, ensuring that something for everyone. And this includes events from the various learning event holders across the city. Final slide. So for the Winning Learning Festival to thrive, continuous engagement with the community, all sectors of the community is essential. So we have sponsors. So Victoria University has been a consistent sponsor for 8 years, but we've also had diverse entities such as Avalon Airport and Pacific Werribee, a large local shopping centre. These partnerships have been crucial in expanding the festival's reach and impact. Finally, in terms of keeping the festival fresh and vibrant, we use 2 approaches. We have a theme each year that is aimed to address timely issues and inspire our community. And finally, our festival includes a range of categories each year that ensures that we have broad and inclusive activities for the whole community. I could talk, as you could see, on the Learning Festival for quite a number of more minutes, but I will finish off with that. So thanks, Jenny. You can jump back on.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the plug too, John, about Adult Learners Week, which we've just launched the website today. But as a testament to my own personal experience with the Learning Festival out at Wyndham, I have seen it really grow and become more sustainable over the years. And it's great to see that it's still going and that you're able to massage it enough to pick up on what's happening in the community, and particularly to support those existing celebrations of learning that might already be there, because as you say, it can be a threat when there's too many things for people to put their energy into. So thank you so much, and thanks for being on time. Much appreciated. And there'll be there's quite a lot of dialogue in there in terms of the chat, so I suggest people have a look at that. Thank you, John, and we'll have a chance to ask some questions a little bit later. It's my privilege now to invite our third panellist, Yvonne Lane. So we're going back over the other side of the world for us here in Australia, over to Limerick. Yvonne is the Limerick UNESCO Learning City Lifelong Learning Facilitator from the Republic of Ireland. She has coordinated the Limerick Lifelong Learning Festival since 2011, and she will talk about the importance of partnerships for sustainability and inclusion. So welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Jenny, and for the warm welcome to this wonderful webinar this morning, Irish time, and thanks to Sharon and Diane and yourself for hosting. It's lovely to see so many Learning City colleagues and friends and PASCAL and UNESCO friends, many attendees that have logged on this morning, many of whom that have inspired and helped Limerick along its way, and we'll touch on some of those themes in my input today. So before I start into the theme and the sustainability, as you mentioned, partnerships for sustainability, just to mention a quick piece about my own role as well, that there are 3 key lead agencies for the Learning Limerick Steering Group in Limerick, and that's my own employer, the Limerick and Clare Education and Training Board, Limerick City and County Council, obviously a very important partner and funder of the initiative here in Limerick, and the local development company, Paul Partnership, that hosts my own position, and that's where I work out of in carrying out the work. So also to mention, around the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities that we joined in 2016, we would have been fortunate to receive our own Learning City Award the following year in 2017, and we visited our good friends conference in Cork, Learning City, to receive that award that year, which we were delighted about. So next slide, please. So I suppose Diane asked for the Limerick input to particularly focus on the SDGs that have focused on the importance of partnerships for sustainability and inclusion. Number 11, sustainable cities and communities, and the importance in number 17 of partnerships for the goals. So I'll touch on those. That is not to say that SDG 4, inclusive quality education, and 10, reduced inequalities, are not hugely important for our work also for Learning Limerick. But just around the whole partnership, our motto, communities connecting, learning, for our own festival in Limerick. You see there, communities, the importance of inclusion, connecting, the importance of partnerships. And we have a multi-agency steering group for Learning Limerick that includes the agencies, the community partners, the business partners, all that have a role, as Dennis alluded to, in creating a culture of lifelong learning for Limerick City and County. We also had a memorandum of understanding signed by our lead 6 partners in 2019. Now, when I reflected on the importance of partnerships for Learning Limerick, I cannot but reflect on the importance of our membership of the Irish Network of Learning Cities that includes 6 cities in the north and south of Ireland here. And I'm delighted, as well as both myself and Dennis, that we see Dublin Learning Cities, Abbey, and Belfast Learning City. Patricia has logged on this morning, so you're very welcome as well to the webinar. But just we really support each other's festivals. In Ireland, we go and visit, I suppose, our key events. We often speak as a panelist or a key speaker at one of each other's events, and we also help brainstorm kind of overcoming challenges which we all face from time to time, and we meet and support each other on those. So I suppose if we can move to the next slide, please, I'll go into the festival proper. And we're not going to have a heavy stats presentation, so don't worry. The next couple of slides are all photos again, but I just picked out 3 kind of key statistics that I thought were relevant from this year's festival evaluation. As was mentioned, we're 14 years on the go. We have grown to, over those 14 years, to now between 160 to 200 events, which for the population of Limerick City and County of over 200,000 here is a nice number to be working with, we feel. And I suppose each year we have surveys to our event hosts, our committee members, our participants, to ask how we did, what can we do to improve, etc. So I thought these were interesting, that almost half of the event hosts said that their event would not have taken place only for the festival. So you see the amount of activity that the festival generates. Over half of the respondents said that they made new partnerships or links as a result of this year's festival, and over 3/4 of our committee members felt that partnerships through their own sectors had been advanced. 83% said that their event for our festival forms part of an initiative that will continue post-festival. For example, they might launch a series of events, that a webinar or an event that first takes place as part of the festival, or they might test out a topic, and if there's demand, they might repeat it or off a waiting list after the festival takes place. So that year-round activity is great. So if we could have the next slide, please. We're very proud in Limerick that we hold what we call the Learning Limerick networking meetings for our event hosts twice a year. And this, as John and Wyndham says, really the festival is a year-round project and activity. And we like to hold a networking meeting coming up to the festival, and then after the festival in the autumn indeed as well. So they represent an opportunity to network for our event hosts, to share their ideas for events that they might be thinking of holding, and then cross-sectorally they might actually partner up thanks to the networking meetings and co-host events together, and they really help and support each other to make each other's events successful. We also hold lovely workshops as part of these networking meetings. There was a lovely one last February of crossing the threshold, which meant reaching out using community development principles and using your own social capital in reaching our hard to reach, hard to engage learners, which is very important. In October, we're going to twin with Limerick Mental Health Week to do our keynote speaker around the theme of wellness and positive mental health, which is so linked to lifelong learning and positive lifelong learning. So I suppose that's a networking meeting. So if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. I suppose just the whole importance of reaching out to the communities and inclusion and hard to reach learners. We have a project that was born or launched in Limerick in 2019 called the Learning Ambassadors Project. And this really involves people that are from Limerick City and County, young and old. There's a focus on community learners, but not necessarily so, from other sectors also. And what these learners do, they're proud that Limerick is a UNESCO Learning City region as well as ourselves, and they want to share their journey and their passion for lifelong learning and maybe obstacles that they have overcome. Sorry, yeah, great, thank you. And I suppose inspire and motivate others to take up learning as a result. So we really like to involve our ambassadors with our festival. They have launched festival events, spoken at festival events for us, visited festival events. They've spoken at some of our key learning events throughout the year. So do I have 1 or 2 minutes left, Jenny? Sorry, I can't. You're on mute.
I mean it also, Yvonne.
I mean it, lovely. Okay. We're coming to the
Thank you.
last slide. We're coming to the last slide. Thank you. 1 minute. So indeed, they launched their festival ambassadors booklet telling their stories at one of our networking meetings as well in 2022. And is also an ambassador on the Learning Limerick steering group. So I think that learner voice on the key decision-making structure is important. So the last slide, please. So I think key seminars and conferences inviting other UNESCO learning cities are important for the festival, and we've invited other members of the Irish network to share their learning at such seminars that we've held a number of years for our festival. But this year we decided to go back to something that we did a number of years for our festival, which was a kind of a key interactive learning activities with performances event to really showcase and celebrate lifelong learning. So we did that for a half a day in a large Life Centre event. Creativity for Wellbeing was its title. Line dancing, painting, singing, the worry exchange, crafts, and much more. You see there's our ambassadors in the middle centre and the top there, sharing their own passion for learning. You see line dancing and singing going on. A lovely event, and I suppose that coupled with our launch event that is held a month before the festival, they really help to get the celebration of lifelong learning message out there, and coupled with our media partners, I suppose, really to inspire and really motivate others to take up lifelong learning opportunities. So I suppose I've reached the end of my Limerick input, but just, I suppose, to say thank you very much. And it's a lovely sharing of learning here this evening or this morning, depending on your time. And I'm picking up lots of tips already. Thank you.
Sorry, thanks very much, Yvonne. There's a lot happening in Limerick, and it's was very good to hear about the community development approach and engaging learner voices. That's so important in designing and implementing festivals. So thank you so much for that. I'd now like to introduce our fourth panellist and our final speaker, Colin Pillay from, he's the Program Manager from the Municipal Institute of Learning in Durban in South Africa. Colin has over 30 years in public service across various government levels. He served as the Deputy Director in the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform. And he's going to talk a bit about lessons from international partners from the Learning City of Durban in South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jenny. Good morning, colleagues. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good evening, colleagues. So my name is Colin Pillay. Thanks for the intro, Jenny. So it's quite coincidental that today's webinar falls on an auspicious day in South Africa. It's Mandela Day. The 18th of July is generally recognized as Mandela's birthday, but it's also an opportunity for organizations, individuals, and communities to take time to
Sorry, Colin, I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. Is anyone else having that problem? Right. Okay. There's just a little bit of cutting out, Colin, so hopefully we can get you clearer. Thank you.
Checking if I'm still audible. Jenny, others? Is it any better now?
That's a little bit better when you get closer. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I'm saying that today's webinar coincides with Mandela's birthday, former President of South Africa. And it's also an opportunity for us also to reflect on the values, principles, and making a positive impact in our own communities. So here we are today in this international cohort, speaking about celebrating learning. And if we go into the next slide, colleagues. So our efforts in this are very much around positioning as the learning city. And our journey formally started more than 12 years ago. And those 4 points on the bullets there tell you exactly some of the key questions that we asked more than a decade ago. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the framework that we've been using, bring our partners together, and it's an opportunity also to bring together academia, industry, and city officials, that we could, embrace Devon as an engaged learning city. So on the left-hand side, you see some of the inputs that we've been investing in, and certainly I think our investments at some point are going to, create the impacts that we desire. So whilst we, bringing learning partners together, we see the opportunity through a learning festival to make this a reality. Next slide, please. Yeah, so colleagues, this is how we've been investing in this partnership, where we have higher education institutions as a resource partner to respond to some of our key developmental challenges. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these slides. I want to get to the last slide, where I reflect on how we are preparing for our very own learning festival. Next slide, please. Yeah, so let me take a minute to speak about the Institute of Learning that I am a program manager of. So there are 4 pillars, and my pillar is the one in green, where I'm working and investing in this partnership with higher education institutions, and looking at how academic partners could also become a very, very active learning partner in our ascent to a learning city. So the Municipal Institute of Learning certainly is in a strategic attempt to position Devon as a center of learning and to respond to some of our key developmental challenges. Next slide, please. Yeah, so reflecting on each of the presentations this afternoon or evening, there are certainly some key considerations that we've taken in crafting our very own learning city. So certainly for me, a conceptual framing has to be very, very clear with, with its aims, objectives, and themes very, very clearly agreed to and identified. Certainly, I think there's an element of strong partnerships and collaboration where we co-create, conspire, collude, and jointly ensure that we make this happen as a consortium. Certainly, I think inclusivity is a key principle. Whilst we want to ensure that the festival is appealing and is citywide, we want to ensure also that participation is quite diverse. Certainly, I think planning has to be very, very inclusive and embracing, and also that we have to onboard our learning partners very, very early in this process. Also, the principle of being flexible. Learning forms that Dennis mentioned, formal, non-formal, and informal, has to be all brought into a festival that creates opportunities for all to enjoy and embrace. I think also, whilst we in a celebratory mood in festivals around the world, also is to embrace innovation and ensure that it becomes attractive. So the festival we see must be a magnet for all our partners in the various learning forms, and also for the communities themselves to be attracted to these festivals. Certainly, I think we have to look at proximity. The idea of taking the festival into the communities certainly is part of our key principle to ensure that we minimize travel distance and maximize on engagement. So the idea also is to make learning fun. So part of the conceptual framing is trying to embrace a number of objectives. So the idea for Devon's very first learning city is to ensure that we showcase and grow learning opportunities and experiences in the city, to promote inclusive learning. So lifelong learning certainly is embedded quite strongly in this festival. So we have to cater for all ages, cater for the able and for the differently able, the advantaged and the disadvantaged, for the able communities as well as the rural communities, and to celebrate collaborative learning with the partners that I mentioned, whether the academia, business, industry, civil service organizations, and to ensure that we bring learning centers, schools, communities all together in this celebration. The idea is to build on the social capital and to also embrace locality. So we're using this festival as a social learning transformation agenda opportunity also in our history, and to look at how we promote education for sustainable development and also contribute to the 17 SDGs. Yeah, so the colleagues, the intention then is to secure the knowledge from the partners that have been through this part before and to make this a reality. And lastly, Durban has been identified as a pilot site for the implementation of the learning framework. So we're looking at the festival itself as an opportunity to test this pilot framework that we've set up, given that Durban is the only learning city in the country. So all eyes on the city of Durban. Jenny, that's my last slide. Thank you, please. Hey, Jenny, we can't hear you, or I can't hear you.
It's me. Sorry, I forgot to turn. I was on mute. You think
You're on mute again, Jenny.
there's nothing like talking to myself. I don't know how that happened. I thought I got over that. You're on mute, turn it off. So thank you, Colin, for that inspiration from Durban, particularly putting up the last points for consideration, because I think they reflected some of the previous points that we'd heard from other speakers, but also they're a good starting point for our Q&A. So what we'd like to do is invite you all to, for all panelists to put their cameras on. So that we can be open for a Q&A. So if John, Yvonne, Colin, Dennis and our keynote speaker, Rob, if you'd like to put your cameras on, open it up to the audience to either put some questions in the chat, and there may be some questions that have already been in the chat, which I can pick up on. But if people could identify their question, so and identify if they're particularly asking a question to someone on the panel or if it's a general question. So if there's any questions, if you'd like to put them in the chat. Going back here. So Leanne,
Okay.
I thought you had a question. Is there anything in there? Okay, so this one's for Dennis. Can you see that in the chat, or do you need me to read it out?
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, I can see there's two questions there. Again, I welcome the other panelists joining to answer them. So the first one about reaching out to hard-to-reach learners. So our key to that always has been the networks that are there in the city. So the learning neighbourhoods are an expression of that. But even before the learning neighbourhoods, we had a commitment that networks in the city in specific communities was the best way to reach people, because they had centres in their neighbourhood, they knew where people lived, and they could really promote new opportunities, new courses, new activities that would literally bring people in. That crossing the threshold idea that Yvonne spoke about earlier is very, very powerful in that regard. So it was working with those partners, and that means being quite open to working with, again, non-formal and informal partners. You know, one example I always give is when I started in the role, I was asked to meet a craft group, and I went in with my preconceived notions of a small group who maybe knitted or crocheted once a week, and that this wasn't community development. This wasn't going to lead to lifelong learning. I couldn't have been more wrong. A very small group of fantastic women leaders have really changed the city using craft as the medium. Very high level craft. They've crocheted dresses that have been worn at the BAFTA Awards nights. They've crocheted jewelry, and they've crocheted a chandelier. So a very high level craft, but very, very inclusive as well. So partners like that, and just to be quite open, whether it's a sports organization, you know, the men's sheds that you spoke about earlier there, Rob, as well. They're strong in Ireland and in Cork. All those partners really make it possible to connect with hard to reach learners. A centralized festival otherwise would never reach them. And the second question, and I'll open it up to the panelists to add their thoughts maybe then. What changed my mind? I could see that this worked, even in the very first year. People that participated enjoyed the experience. So a lot of smaller partners who work hard all year long to reach hard to reach learners and to deliver programs that are relevant to the needs of people in the area. They saw themselves in the program. So we print a printed program every year, and we have an online one subsequently in more recent years, but they saw themselves in the program. So it was recognition for their efforts, but they enjoyed the experience, and the enjoyment of the day and seeing different people meet up really was the fuel for the engine that kept the festival going and sustained it through some dark years as well. We speak about the successes on events like this, but I would like to reflect that we've had difficult years around budgets and funding, and it did take a lot of heart by volunteer members of the committee to keep the festival going. But that heart was fueled by that energy. So I might open it up. Maybe others would like to comment also. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Dennis. If people wanted to add to that on the panel, or there are a couple of other questions there. There's one in particular around, is digital learning included in learning festivals? And there may be, John, you might want to give an example where you are, and some of the others just might give an example, because obviously it's a growing area and there's cybersecurity and a whole range of things that we're coming to face now that we hadn't before, and people need to learn more about.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, digital learning has always over the 8 years been a strong focus, whether it's really basic digital literacy around engaging seniors with mobile phones. But I mean, this year, I know I just looked at an event. There's like AI events. We've got events around how to use open access databases. So we had an event run by the Wyndham Tech School, which was around how you track seals across the world, and smart bins, and everyone can log on and see when their smart bin needs emptying. So we've had really, from the really foundational digital skills through to more advanced digital programs across those 8 years. That has always been a strong focus, and particularly, of course, those 3 years that were affected by COVID.
Thanks, John. Any of the other panelists wanted to respond to the question about digital learning? No, we can move on to another question. Oh, okay.
Sorry. I was going to say about digital learning that when we were in Nocera in Italy, in a school, I noticed how much the younger people were focusing on that aspect and inviting people in to certain activities, and there was older people were getting a chance to engage with digital activities. And another thing that they were doing to reach out to groups that wouldn't normally come in was through the school radio station, where they were actually broadcasting out into the community, and they were giving recipes and things for things that were being made and showing, and I just felt, I was so amazed that the young people could take up things that, you wouldn't naturally think about that they would be able to do so. And if I could just also say about the excluded groups, and Dennis had talked a bit about this, and I know that in Cork, because I've been there several times, they're doing marvelous things there and reaching out. I think sometimes there's a need for a special activity or festival, a mini festival you might call it, for certain groups, like literacy learners, or Dennis talked about the men's sheds, because there's many in Ireland. Barry tells me now there are more in Ireland per head of population than there are in Australia. And the people that don't come to the other things, maybe we need to go to them and do special things, and maybe they will bridge that gap at another stage. Language can be a terrible barrier. People can't communicate effectively in the main language of the festival, which is that it will stop them coming, because they'd be worried about that, particularly older people. A lot of older women, for example, from ethnic communities often don't speak English, for example, either at all or have very little. So it's how do you, thinking about these particular barriers that some groups might face, and how those can be built in, whether into the main festival or through some activity that's aligned to the festival at another time, and maybe creating a bridge. That's all I want to say for the minute. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. I'm just mindful of the time, and I'd like to just give Yvonne and Colin an opportunity to comment on anything. I can see, look, there's lots of questions, and there's a few people who've got their hands up. We're aiming to finish in about 5 or so minutes. So if people can just hold off for a bit, and we'll give a chance for Yvonne and Colin to respond to some of the points. So Yvonne, did you want to have an opportunity?
I could just touch. Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Just touch on two things very briefly. Yeah, similar to John in the digital learning and our experience during the COVID years, where our events went down in number, like between 80 and 100 events, because they were all online. So the festival kind of halved in size. But that upskilling for both our event hosts and participants was a great experience as well in digital learning and accessing learning online. And we also had a lovely experience just this last year of upskilling our community event hosts in promoting their events with Canva templates that we designed for them, but that they populated and used for their social media. And it was really community development in action, I felt. I suppose I just wanted to close with a final mention about kind of maintaining enthusiasm. And there's a lot of questions in the chat around the importance of funding, etc., which would probably take another webinar to fully go into, as Dennis alluded to, the struggles, etc. But just, I suppose it's using the UNESCO brand, mixing it up, keeping it fresh, changing it, having the events on a year-round basis. We've Irish Learning Cities Day coming up at the end of September, etc. So they're just a couple of comments about maintaining enthusiasm and momentum. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you, Yvonne. Colin, do you have anything to add to any of those comments or questions?
I'll just pick up on 2 points there, Jenny. One is the issue of the language. I think, Rob, you made the point that I think, allowing for this diversity is so crucial. South Africa has 11 official languages. But certainly, I think, shouldn't be restricted. We don't cater for the diversity itself. I think, Yvonne, the point about funding sources, certainly I think this is a challenge we're working through right now in terms of conceptualizing is how we bring co-created opportunities and mobilizing resources. So, but I think for me it's not so much about how much it costs, but how much effort you put into this joint visioning for me. Yeah. So the money will come if you go out there, but I think if you look at the bigger picture about celebrating learning in its diverse forms, the resources will somehow find its way. It doesn't have to be an expensive opportunity when you are learn on site in these days, but it's about making that opportunity available for all. Those are the 2 points from my side, Jenny.
Thank you, Colin. It's a little bit crackly there for me. I don't know if it was for other people, but I got the gist of what you were saying. Thank you. Look, I think we'll have to close the question time, but this really does point to the fact that we might need to run a follow-up webinar, because having these kinds of discussions across the globe is really important, and some really important gems and treasures that have come out in the points that people have made in their talks. We've just got a few more minutes, and I just wanted to invite, so thank you to all of the panel and our guest speaker. I just wanted to invite Kashish, who's going to do Mentimeter. Are we still doing that? And I'll hand it over to Kashish to just do that for the next couple of minutes, come back, and then we'll close the session. It's just so full of so much. It's hard to squeeze it in such a short time, but it's better to want for more. And we can always follow up in our group, because I think there is a need to pick up on some of these issues and look at them more closely, because there's so many wonderful things that you're all doing out in your learning festivals. So I invite Kashish, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Thank you.
Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Is the
Yes.
Mentimeter screen
Yes.
visible? Yep.
Yep.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny, for the introduction, and a very good evening to everyone. Thank you so much, first of all, for being part of today's webinar. And we are really excited to engage with you all through a very quick interactive activity using Mentimeter. So to participate in this activity, I would request you all to please pick up your phones and scan the QR codes that are visible on the screens. Or alternatively, you can log into www.menti.com and enter the code that is displayed on the top of your screen, which is 81748763. And once you've entered this code, you will be able to respond to the questions. So since we're running out of time, we will quickly move through the first question. And the first question is, what was the main highlight you heard about the learning festivals today? We'd just like you to take a moment to reflect on some of the key things that stood out to you during the session today. We would really like to hear what resonated most with you. And I guess we already have a few answers up and more coming in. The first one is that they are fun and inclusive. The impact they have on both individuals and the community. Ideas of having ambassadors, different impacts of festivals. And we have more rolling in. But due to time constraints, we may not get enough time to go through all of these responses. And we do not want you to miss out on hearing what everyone's experience of the webinar was like. So we will be sharing a compilation of all the responses by early next week. Moving on to the next question up here. The second question is, what actions will you take as a result of today's webinar to help improve lifelong learning within your cities and communities? So just consider the discussions and ideas presented to you today. We would love to hear about the steps you are planning to take to foster and enhance lifelong learning in your local areas. We have answers rolling in, find out what the community needs to try and deliver, follow up with others, ideas of learning neighborhoods, seek more inclusive programming, amplify the learner voices, and reach out to more partners. And it keeps going on. While these are very insightful and thoughtful responses, like Jenny mentioned, we're running out of time, and we sincerely appreciate your enthusiastic participation.
Thank you for that very.
Yep.
There's not another question. Is there another question?
No, no more questions. I did stop sharing the screen. Yep.
Good. Thank you.
Yep.
thanks for that opportunity to have people put in what they've got out of the session, and I'm sure there'll be more in the future. So I want to thank everyone for participating, especially our speakers for advancing our knowledge of the topic of the Learning Festival, driving local action on sustainable development goals for long-term impact. Special thanks to Dr. Leanne Wheeler, who's the Honourable CEO of the Australian Learning Communities Network, which is very important in this partnership and helping us set up for this webinar, and her valuable contribution. And for also bringing many of the practitioners and helping practitioners build their sustainable communities through lifelong learning. There will be a short survey that's going to be put in the chat if people have time, able to fill that in. We'll be sharing the presentation, the recording and the resources flyer in the next few days. If you're in Australia, please look up the Adult Learners Week website. Our theme is Take the Journey, so take the learning journey. And I'd just like to pick up on a couple of points. One was in Rob's talk about how important it is to democratising of education. And I think in the current times that we're in, it's really important to make sure that education and lifelong learning are there for all, and the importance of democracy, the role that education and learning can play in democracy to help us make critical and informed decisions, because there's so much misinformation out there. We really need to have that lifelong learning approach. And there's just so many valuable inputs from our speakers today. So I would wish you well, stay safe, and hope that you can carry forward some of these ideas and from this shared session, and we'll be in touch with you again. So have a good night, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. And thank you so much for participating and contributing. Good night, good morning, good day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.